This podcast may contain graphic and potentially upsetting content related to true crime and the paranormal. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, I'm Corinna Howard and this is the Monday Night Revue. Hello and welcome to episode 156 of the Monday Night Revue. I'm recording in my kitchen because I have a sad little ill person upstairs. My middle child has got the flu-like lurgy that's going around. He has a bad headache. Everything hurts, he says, and I am not feeling too great myself, so I'm a little bit worried because a lot of my work involves me being outside, and if I don't work, I don't get paid, which I know a lot of people will be like, yeah, obviously. But some people get paid sick leave, or you can work from your laptop. But if I don't go outside and shovel horse shit, I don't get paid to do it. So I'm trying to think positive. I've put my warm, snuggly jumper on, and I'm making the best of things. But it means that I'm in my kitchen so that if the sad little ill person needs me, I'm not out in my office, which is in the garden. So if the sound is crappier than usual, that is why. So this year I am trying to read more, but that is going to involve listening to more fiction on my Audible account because I have a lot of time to listen to audiobooks. I don't have a lot of time to sit and read books. And so I was getting jealous of people's commute. But in fact, as I mentioned, when I'm working outside, it's no reason for me to not be listening to stuff. But one of the books that I started last year, reading a book, was A Killer by Design by Dr. Anne Burgess. And Anne Burgess is one of the people who set up the Behavioral Sciences Unit at the FBI. And she is an absolute, just a badass in every way. And this book was a really hard read. I read a lot of true crime, but there was just a lot about specific serial offenders, Ed Kemper, that kind of thing, and just how that her knowledge of them and her understanding of them and interviewing them helped form the Behavioral Sciences Unit and our understanding of the psychology and all of that. And it's absolutely fantastic book, but I had to take a break because it was just a lot. And I tend to read physical books in bed, and I would get into my bed all cozy and warm and then read this horrendous stuff. So it took me a little while to finish. But absolutely one of my favourite true crime books that I've read. So A Killer by Design by Anne Burgess is my recommendation for this week. There's also two books that I've read that I used for this week's episode that we'll get onto later. Thank you, as always. Big shout out to everyone who is a member of the Patreon. Really appreciate it because it just makes a huge difference to me being able to take the time out of my day to research and edit and record these. I do it all myself. There is no one else. So members of the Patreon, I hope you love your extra content. And I just wanted to give you all a big shout out and say thank you very much for supporting me over there. And everyone who buys merch, I hope you love it as much as I do. I'm wearing a Pod Dog t-shirt today because they're just so comfy. Now, onwards with today's episode. Since the very earliest of times, poisons have been used as a means for settling old scores, instruments of personal advancement, as a means to execute criminals, and by those who found life to be an intolerable burden. Though the ancient Greeks preferred hemlock for the rest of Europe, arsenic was king. In fact, it's said to be the poison of kings, the king of poisons, and today we are going to be talking about arsenic. Sources for today include A is for Arsenic, The Poisons of Agatha Christie by Catherine Harkup, A Taste for Poison, 11 Deadly Substances and the Killers Who Use Them by Neil Bradbury, loads of stuff from the internet, as you can imagine. There's loads of information on arsenic. The sciencey bit. And arsenic is a naturally occurring metalloid. It is the 14th most common element in the Earth's crust, and it can be found in minerals, groundwater, and even small amounts in food. So I think we probably all know that apple pips, are they pips or seeds, have arsenic in them, which is why for some animals they can be really toxic because the amount of arsenic is too much. But don't be fooled by its common presence. Arsenic is also one of the most infamous poisons in history. In its inorganic form, it is highly toxic, with prolonged exposure leading to cancer, organ damage, and death. For centuries, arsenic has been the poison of choice for murderers and power-hungry schemers, earning the nickname the inheritance powder. From royal assassinations to the suspected poisoning of Napoleon Bonaparte, its sinister reputation is well-deserved. Even in Victorian times, it found its way into cosmetics, wallpaper, and medicines, unwittingly poisoning the very people who used it. More on that later. Poison and politics have always been intertwined, and there were some women who have made creating, selling, and using poisons into a profession and an art form. What made this poison a preference for many, including the family we're going to talk about in a minute, is that it has no taste and is soluble, so it's easily dissolved in liquid and is easily absorbed by the lungs, skin, and gastrointestinal tract. So it can be added to any food or drink undetected, and the effects are similar to food poisoning. It wasn't originally cheap, though, so those who used it were often fairly wealthy, and those people who prepared and sold it made good money. And even in Roman times, there would be people who were professional poison makers. That was their job, professional poisoners, who were used by people who were so high up in society because they could afford it, that they were protected by their clients, essentially. But as with many drugs and poisons, its effects meant that it was also used by doctors to encourage purging, vomiting, which was considered a good way for the body to get rid of whatever ailed it. And sometimes that's right. In fact, sometimes that can be fair, that can be right for arsenic in itself. If you haven't absorbed it already, the vomiting can sometimes get rid of whatever it is that's been laced with arsenic. Now, the first symptom of arsenic poisoning is vomiting and abdominal cramps with 30 minutes after ingesting it. For some, this may lead to the rest being got rid of from the body, but for those who have taken a lethal dose, this is just the start. And arsenic is actually more effective and less detectable, I guess, less suspicious if it's delivered over time. It can accumulate in the body and be lethal. So you often find poisoners being very attentive nurses to those they've poisoned so that they can continue to administer the poison. And you quite often will have people who are extremely ill and end up in hospital where they improve. And then they go home and they're extremely ill again, or they become very ill in the hospital once a specific person has visited. So one family made the use of arsenic incredibly famous. Using poison to get rid of people was a hit in Europe in the 16th century, and at the same time, dysentery and cholera were doing the rounds, so arsenic was a great poison of choice. The infamous Italian Borgia family, particularly Pope Alexander VI and his son Cesare, are famous for using arsenic to eliminate their rivals, particularly bishops and cardinals. Though it's Cesare's half-sister Lucrezia who seems to be taking the rap for this, even though there's not a lot of historical evidence to show that she was actually one of the poisoners. Though never proven, their reputation for political poisoning is pretty much undoubted. It's said that they used to dump out some pig entrails, sprinkle arsenic on them, leave it outside in the heat to rot. This would then be ground into powder and sprinkled into the food and drink of whoever they wanted to off. If the arsenic didn't get them, the rotted entrails probably would. What a way to go. And quite often, the intended victim would be invited for a lavish supper where they would be piled with poisoned wine. They would then be taken off extremely ill. People would say, oh dear, they must have eaten something. And as per church law, when a clergyman died, everything he owned would go to the church. So the Pope. And pretty soon the Borgias were one of the wealthiest families in Italy. Karma did come and bite them in the bum, though. as they decided one day to have a sort of pre-party drink and called for a bottle of wine, and whether by accident or design, they were bought the wrong bottle. Now the Pope dies. Cesare realizes what's happened and dresses himself in the carcass of a slaughtered mule, which was believed at the time to protect you from poisoning, and he does survive, but his power is all gone, and it's the end of their reign of poisoning terror. Catherine Deschet's La Voisin, as covered in a Patreon exclusive episode I did called The Paris Poisoner, if you haven't listened to it, was employed by Paris society to get rid of people. And it's at this time that it was referred to as poudre de succession, inheritance powder. And she was one of many women who made this a job, either by necessity or for the love of it. Quite often it is linked to healers, herbalists, women who were not able to be officially medically trained, but by necessity had medical understanding. For example, midwives, they were brought in to help women who were unwell, men didn't want to deal with, and sometimes these women needed a little help with an abusive husband or difficult partner. Now, Lucasta in the Roman Empire, who's thought to be the first recorded serial killer, and Julia Tofana in the 16th century Rome, who came up with aqua tofana, which helped women rid themselves of abusive or just inconvenient husbands. These women made it their career, and as I said earlier, were very useful to people, and therefore it protected them. Arsenic became readily available for all as a byproduct of the Industrial Revolution. As demand for iron and lead grew, arsenic built up as a white solid in factory chimneys and would have to be scraped out and removed periodically. And rather than just throwing it away, it was sold as rat poison and a killer for other household pests. And this meant that not only did it become very affordable, but that most homes had arsenic in some form as pest control. And anyone could use it to bump off an annoying relative. In the early 19th century, with no way to detect arsenic in the body, it was a great way to pass off a death as from natural causes, whether it was violent gastroenteritis or some sort of sinister cancer or anything like that. And it wasn't until the late 1830s that British chemist James March came up with a way to show evidence of arsenic in a way that a jury could understand. Because also, even when the medical profession suspected poisoning, they would blar on in a way that the jury couldn't understand. And if the jury can't understand, they're not going to go in your favour. But it wasn't just rat poisons that took arsenic into the home. Several arsenic compounds come in bright colours and have been used as pigments for thousands of years. In 1775, Carl Wilhelm Scheele created a green that was added to the pigment list, Scheele's green. And these pigments were a big improvement on the previous vegetable dyes that had been used, as they were longer lasting and didn't fade so easily. A few years later, Paris green was added to the pigment list, and these pigments were all the rage in Victorian interior design, giving homes a fashionable and a luxurious appearance, being used in wallpaper, clothes, and even cake icing. It was noticed that bedrooms papered with Scheele's green wallpaper had fewer bed bugs, and this was a massive added bonus. So not only was it incredibly fashionable, but you had fewer bed bugs. I can think of a few things as bad as bed bugs. To put the paper up, you used a mixture of water and flour made into a paste. But as this sat on the damp British walls, mould would grow and react with the arsenic, releasing toxic arsenic-laden dust into the air. And people exposed to these wallpapers suffered from symptoms such as headaches, nausea, breathing difficulties, and even mysterious slow deaths. Remember, arsenic is a cumulative poison. So it was even killing off and damaging the people in the factories making this wallpaper. And while doctors and scientists began suspecting the link between arsenic-laced wallpaper and declining health, it took decades for the public to accept the danger. By the late 19th century, the use of arsenic in wallpaper was largely phased out. Too late for one person, though. During his exile in St. Helena, Napoleon stayed in a house in which the rooms were, in his favourite colour, bright green. It's here that he died, and his cause of death is generally believed to have been stomach cancer. But was this in fact arsenic poisoning over a period of time, or indeed cancer caused by exposure to arsenic, which has been linked to an increased risk of gastric carcinoma? Analysis of samples revealed significant amounts of arsenic in his hair, and with the damp climate of St. Helena, it is likely that fungus grew on the walls and he was slowly poisoned by the arsenic. Now, it's since been proved that Napoleon did indeed die of stomach cancer, but it has also been shown that arsenic was present in his walls. So whether the arsenic and the paint had helped with this development of the cancer, we can never know. In 1858, confectioner William Hardaker, known as Humbug Billy, sold peppermint lozenges in the local market, and they were hugely popular, and people would save up their money and go to Humbug Billy and get a bag of his peppermints. But unfortunately, at one point, he unknowingly sold some that had been laced with arsenic. The deadly mistake happened when a local supplier accidentally swapped a harmless ingredient, plaster of Paris, often used by confectioners to bulk out sweets, as it was cheaper than sugar, with arsenic trioxide, which had been stored in the same warehouse. Now, arsenic trioxide, plain white powder, plaster of Paris, plain white powder, flour, also used to bulk out sweets, plain white powder, and literally it was a case of barrels being next to each other and the wrong barrel being chosen. The result was catastrophic. Those who consumed the sweets began experiencing violent illness, and within days, 20 people had died, with over 200 others severely poisoned. Among the victims was Alice Tripp and her family, who had innocently purchased the tainted sweets. And the tragedy led to widespread outrage and a public inquiry, ultimately prompting stricter food safety laws in Britain. And this is a sort of chilling reminder of how lax regulations in the 19th century allowed everyday products to become absolutely lethal. In 19th century Austria, particularly in the region of Styria, which is birthplace of Arnold Schwarzenegger, a bizarre practice baffled scientists and travellers alike. People were deliberately consuming arsenic, and known as arsenic eaters, these individuals regularly ingested small amounts of arsenic trioxide, believing it had health and cosmetic benefits. They claimed it improved their complexion, gave them a more youthful appearance, and even enhanced their strength and endurance, improving their wind, meaning they could breathe better whilst working. Peasants and woodcutters in particular used arsenic to boost their stamina when working in mountainous, high-altitude terrain. What shocked observers was that these arsenic eaters seemed unaffected by what should normally have been deadly poison. In fact, they often built up a tolerance over time, starting with a lump the size of a grain of rice and increasing the amount, allowing them to consume doses that would have been fatal to an unaccustomed person. This practice led to fascination and skepticism in the medical community. Some doctors initially dismissed the claims as myths, while others investigated the phenomenon more seriously. While initially their appearance would improve, arsenic would kill off any bacteria in the body, so anything that would cause bad skin would be killed off, so complexion would be improved. It would cause fluid retention, so women appeared more curvaceous, which was appreciated, and a vasodilation of the capillaries led to healthy-looking rosy cheeks and would obviously then improve oxygen supply. However, while arsenic eaters may have developed some resistance, it's more likely that those consuming it in larger lumps were excreting most of it before it could poison them, and the long-term effects were still harmful. Chronic arsenic exposure leads to skin lesions, digestive issues, and organ damage. And some historians speculate that these individuals may not have lived as long as they could have done. By the late 19th and early 20th century, as scientific understanding of arsenic's toxicity grew, the practice faded into obscurity, but not before it had spread across Europe and been used as beauty treatments. Interestingly, arsenic eaters who were dug up after death, it was a Styrian tradition to dig up the bones after 12 years to move them to a crypt to make space in the ground for another person, were found to be in really good nick even after 12 years of being buried. And this is because the arsenic would kill off the bacteria that would normally cause putrefaction. The publicity given to the health benefits of arsenic eating helped popularise the use of arsenic in medicines and cosmetics, and it was once again readily available to everyone. And lawyers defending those accused of poisoning someone with arsenic came up with what would become known as the Styrian defence, which basically held that arsenic found in the body could be proof of arsenic eating and was not evidence of foul play. Also, anyone found to have arsenic in their possession could themselves be an arsenic eater or be using it for cosmetic or medical purposes. And one famous case of the Styrian defence was in the case of Madeleine Smith, who faced death by hanging accused of murdering Pierre-Émile Langlier. 19-year-old Smith, from a well-to-do family in Glasgow, educated at Miss Gorton's Academy for Young Ladies, had met 26-year-old Langlier while walking in Glasgow and fell in love. Langlier claimed to be a French nobleman, but in reality was from Jersey, the Channel Island, not the American state. And their relationship would have been deemed unacceptable to Victorian society as they had sex and they kept their relationship a secret. Smith wrote Langlier love letters, they had sex, and they became secretly engaged. When Smith's father found out, I don't think he found out that they were necessarily sleeping together, but he found out about this secret engagement, he forbid the relationship and insisted that she broke it off, which she did, but the couple continued to meet in secret for 2 years. Langlier insisted that Smith burn all his letters, supposedly in case her father found them, though a few do remain. And what we can tell from the letters that we see is that he appears to be incredibly controlling, down to what clothes she should wear, where she was allowed to go, who she could talk to. He kept all of her letters. By 1856, her family, not knowing that the relationship had continued, found a much more suitable match for their daughter. And she, when she met him, agreed with them. A handsome, rich husband who is approved of by your parents and who is going to keep you in a nice way is probably more appealing than a controlling, penniless liar. Now officially engaged, Smith needed to break it off with Langlier, who threatened to show the true nature of their relationship by publicising her letters. If it was known that she'd been having a sexual relationship with another man, not only would it put an end to her engagement, but it would damage her reputation completely. It would sort of rule out the idea of her ever getting married. Smith purchases some arsenic from a local pharmacist and on the 19th of February 1857 puts her plan into action, allegedly. Langlier would often come to her basement bedroom window to talk, and because it's Glasgow and cold, she would pass him out a cup of cocoa to keep him warm. Thursday the 19th of Feb was no different, but this time when Langlier got home, he became violently ill. The next day, Smith went to a different pharmacist, bought another sixpence worth of arsenic, and that night, Langlier had more cocoa. Again, he's taken violently ill. It's quite interesting that in his diary, he notes, "I don't know why I'm getting so ill after drinking this cocoa." On the night of the 21st of March, Langlier was seen staggering along the street, groaning and clutching his stomach. He gets back to his lodgings and is so violently ill that his landlady calls the doctor. initially giving the man morphine. When the doctor arrives the next morning to check on the patient, Langlais is dead. An autopsy revealed a huge amount of arsenic in the dead man's stomach, and Smith is arrested. Now, her defence is, she says that she's been told by the daughter of a well-known actress that applying diluted arsenic to her face, neck and arms would beautify her complexion. The defence held that Langlais was an arsenic eater, and so not only would it be perfectly normal for Smith to be buying arsenic for use on herself, Langlais was an arsenic eater, and that would explain the large amount in his body. After deliberating for 9 days, the jury returned a verdict of not proven. Interestingly, at the time, considering Victorian sensibilities, popular opinion seemed to be that Smith did it, but Langlais deserved it. She ends up moving to England. She marries an artist and has 2 children called Tom and Kitten, and was a popular hostess, eventually dying in New York at the age of 93. Though we know of its potency, now deliberate arsenic poisoning is still not a thing wholly of the past. In July 1998, in the city of Wakayama, Japan, a large pot of curry was served to attendees at a festival. Unbeknownst to the unsuspecting diners, the curry had been laced with arsenic, leading to the deaths of 4 people and severely poisoning 63 others. Victims suffered violent symptoms, including vomiting, convulsions, and organ failure. As investigators scrambled to determine how the poison had entered the food, suspicion quickly fell on Masumi Hayashi, a local woman who had volunteered at the event. A former insurance saleswoman, Hayashi had a history of poisoning attempts and financial troubles, with reports suggesting she had poisoned family members for insurance payouts. Investigators found that arsenic used in the curry closely matched chemicals found in her home, leading to her arrest. Despite her claims of innocence, she was convicted of murder and attempted murder, receiving the death sentence in 2009. However, there's no clear evidence linking Hayashi to the case, and no motive either. Though she had poisoned family members for money, there seems to be no benefit to her poisoning the public willy-nilly. Though we do know from Lucasta in Roman times, she sort of gets a feel for poisoning and does it willy-nilly once she gets into it. So whether that's the case, Hayashi just liked poisoning people. Many believe the wrong person is doing time and possibly facing the death penalty. In fact, studies have shown that tiny amounts of arsenic fed to chicken stimulates the formation of blood vessels, making the chickens appear plump and pink. And it was as late as 2013 that all US chickens were fed arsenic in their diet. So my mind is always blown by things that you think, well, I mean, obviously arsenic's not good for you. Everyone knows arsenic's a poison. It's arguably the most famous poison. And yet 2013 doesn't feel that long ago for it to be fed to every chicken in the US. And that is A for arsenic. I mean, it is, because it's so popular, it is one where there are so many stories on it. I just can't imagine choosing to take something that could make you really ill. And I find the arsenic eaters very interesting. I don't know whether we have it. We don't have rat poison in our homes in the same way anymore, do we? Is it just one of those things where it's actually just me and everyone else has got rat poison lying around? It's just not a thing now. We especially me, because I try and do everything chemical free. It drives my husband and my lovely cleaning lady, who desperately comes in to try and push back the tide of detritus in my house, bonkers, because I'm always making up my own floor cleaner and stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to hear from you, so do email themondaynightrevue@gmail.com. It literally puts a spring in my step when I get an email from a listener Tell your friends, please comment, like and subscribe. It makes such a difference. Come and check out the Patreon. Follow me on social media at the Monday Night Revue. If you're a member of the Patreon, I'm thinking of setting up a Discord where we can share information and chat and talk about updates and all of that kind of thing. Are you on Discord? What do you think? Let me know. And until next time, be kind, stay safe, and always check the back seat before you drive.